I'm Nate, 34 years old, and if there's one thing I've learned about family reunions, it's this. They're less about catching up and more about subtle jabs dressed as small talk. It had been nearly 5 years since I'd last shown up to one, not out of bitterness, but because life had a way of getting full. I'd moved states, started my own tech company, and spent most of my time grinding behind the scenes. No flashy social media posts, no family group chats, just focus. The last time I attended a reunion, I was still job hunting and couch surfing, so I guess the version of me they remembered was stuck in that awkward still figuring it out phase. And apparently, they never updated that image. So when I got the invite this year, handwritten, no less, from my Aunt Marie, I hesitated. I stared at it for days on my kitchen counter, sipping stale coffee and flipping it over like the answer was hidden in the ink. Part of me wanted to toss it, but the other part, the quieter, more stubborn part, wanted to see them. Not to prove anything. At least, that's what I told myself. But maybe just to see if anything had changed. The reunion was held at a fancy countryside estate just outside of town. One of those places with gravel paths, linen-covered tables under white tents, and kids chasing bubbles across freshly mowed lawns. The moment I pulled into the gravel lot in my old Honda Civic, I knew I was out of place. The rest of the lot was filled with shiny SUVs, luxury sedans, and one obnoxiously red convertible that could only belong to my cousin Evan. As I stepped out, adjusting the cuffs of my button-down, I caught sight of my reflection in the car window. I looked fine. Not flashy. Not broke. Just fine. And that, somehow, already felt like a disadvantage. The first greeting came from Aunt Doreen. Tight smile, loud hug, too much perfume. "Nathan," she said, like the name had dust on it. "Still living in, what was it, Seattle? Or did you finally come to your senses and move back where the real jobs are?" I gave her a polite nod and a half smile. "Still in Seattle. Doing that tech thing?" she asked, eyes squinting like she was trying to recall whether I sold printers or designed video games. "Yeah," I said. "Still doing that tech thing." And that was how it began. One by one, the relatives trickled in with their thin smiles and barely veiled curiosity. My cousin Tara mentioned her real estate firm 5 times in a single conversation, and Uncle Rick made a point of talking about how his son had just been promoted to regional manager at some firm I'd never heard of. Everyone, it seemed, was subtly jockeying for status. Except me. I sat at the corner table near the drink station, sipping watered-down lemonade and watching the breeze flutter the corner of the dessert table's tablecloth. Then came the moment I should have expected. My uncle, Uncle Vernon, my dad's younger brother, sauntered over with that same crooked grin he wore at every holiday dinner. The one that made you feel like you were already the punchline to a joke he hadn't told yet. "Nate," he said, clapping me on the shoulder like we were old college buddies. "You still doing that silly tech job? Thought you'd have given up by now." There was a pause. Not long enough to be awkward, but enough to let the chuckles roll in from the nearby table. My cousin Alex laughed a little too loud. My aunt chuckled into her wine glass. I didn't say anything. I just smiled faintly and turned my attention back to my plate of potato salad. Uncle Vernon wasn't done. "You know," he continued, leaning on the chair across from me. "I remember when you were little, always breaking stuff. Remotes, radios. And now you're the computer guy, huh? World sure is upside down." The laughter was louder this time. Not cruel exactly, but it had an edge. A certain delight in seeing someone else squirm. I wanted to say something, anything, but I kept eating. I'd learned long ago that arguing never changed their minds. They liked me boxed up, easy to dismiss. Challenging that image only made them dig deeper. So I sat there, quietly, the corners of my mouth tight, my chest buzzing with a heat I refused to show. A few minutes passed. Conversations resumed. The attention shifted back to Uncle Vernon's golf stories and Aunt Marie's latest cruise photos. I kept eating in silence, half listening, half zoning out. That's when it happened. A low murmur spread from the far side of the lawn, near the valet entrance. Heads turned. A man in a perfectly tailored navy blue suit had just stepped out of a sleek black car that didn't quite belong in our dusty parking lot. His walk was purposeful, crisp, with a confident gait that made people straighten up instinctively. He wasn't just wealthy, he had presence. Whispers floated through the tent. "Wait, isn't he the guy from that Forbes list? Looks like someone important." He scanned the crowd, eyes moving past clusters of relatives, and hors d'oeuvres tables until they landed on me. I blinked, unsure if I was imagining things. But then he smiled, broad, familiar, and walked straight toward my corner table. My Aunt Marie grabbed her husband's arm. Wait, isn't that the billionaire who owns? Before anyone could finish, he was at my side. He clapped me on the back with a warmth that broke through the awkward chill in the air. Boss, he said, didn't expect to see you here. Every fork in the tent paused midair. Conversation stopped. Even the kids chasing bubbles went still. My mouth opened, but no words came out. He grinned, leaned in slightly, and said loud enough for most of the tent to hear, "Your offer went through. You now own the whole block. The development team's already prepping the site." Silence. Thick. Staggering. And in that silence, I turned to see my Uncle Vernon, still holding a glass of champagne mid-toast, eyes wide, hand frozen midair. His drink tilted just slightly, and a single drop slid down the side of the flute, unnoticed. His jaw moved like he wanted to say something, but no words came out. And I just sat there, blinking slowly, trying not to laugh. "Good to see you, Nate," the man added. "We'll finalize the deal Monday. Enjoy your time with the family." He patted my shoulder again, nodded once at the table, and walked back toward his car, leaving behind a trail of stunned silence, whispered guesses, and the unmistakable sting of realization settling in on every face around me. And that's when Uncle Vernon finally spoke. There was a long pause before Uncle Vernon managed to make a sound. He lowered his glass slightly, blinked as if trying to reset his brain, and then finally rasped out, "Wait, you know him?" I turned slowly, still chewing the last bite of coleslaw, swallowed, and looked him dead in the eyes. "Yeah, we work together. Sort of. You work for him?" Aunt Doreen cut in, eyes wide like a kid spotting Santa at the mall. I didn't answer right away. I just set my fork down gently, dabbed the corner of my mouth with a napkin, and leaned back in my chair. "He's on the advisory board of my company. We've been collaborating on a few expansion projects." The words hit the table like a dropped brick. My cousin Alex coughed and tried to act normal, but his face was already flushed pink. Someone dropped a fork. My Aunt Marie just whispered something under her breath and stared at her wine like it might offer an explanation. Uncle Vernon, still not fully caught up, frowned. "Wait, hold on. Your company." I gave a single, patient nod. "Yeah. Started it about 4 years ago. We specialize in infrastructure management for mid-scale cities. Think traffic optimization, predictive utility maintenance, digital zoning systems, stuff like that." "But that doesn't sound like," he trailed off. "That doesn't sound like a real company." I almost laughed, not out of cruelty, but because of the pure irony. The man had built his life around belittling others while clinging to his small-town dealership job like it was the center of the universe. But I didn't say that. I just gave a soft shrug and said, "It's boring to explain, I guess, but real enough." My cousin Evan wandered over, twirling his car keys like he always did when he was nervous. "Wait, is this the company that's been bidding on the commercial redevelopment project on Jefferson Block?" I turned to him. "Yeah, that's ours. We just got confirmation today that the city approved the deal." He let out a low whistle. "Dude, that's prime real estate. The whole tech hub's moving into that area." Uncle Vernon finally sat down across from me, no longer smug, just confused. "But why didn't you say anything?" he asked, voice quieter now. "All these years, and you never told anyone?" That question landed heavier than I expected. For a second, the noise around us faded again, like the tent was holding its breath. I looked at him, really looked at him, and let the silence stretch. Then I said, "Because when I did say something, years ago, everyone laughed. Remember? When I told you I wanted to start my own business. You said I'd be lucky to get a job fixing printers at Best Buy. You call me the tech dreamer." He opened his mouth to deny it, but then closed it again. I continued, my voice calm but firm. So I stopped explaining. I figured if anyone really wanted to know, they'd ask. Aunt Doreen mumbled something about how they were just teasing and didn't mean anything by it. I smiled at her. "Sure, I know, but it still taught me to keep things close." There was an awkward pause, the kind that made people fiddle with their napkins and suddenly remember urgent phone calls. Most of the tent was pretending not to eavesdrop, but the hush told me they were hanging on every word. My younger cousin Maddie, who had always been a little quieter than the rest, slipped over and whispered, "That was really cool." I smiled genuinely. "Thanks, Maddie." Then the questions started coming in, Not from Uncle Vernon or the aunts and uncles, but from the younger cousins. Evan asked what tech stack we used. Maddie asked how I got the idea. Even Alex leaned in and asked how I got investors on board. Suddenly, I wasn't the punchline. I was the panel speaker at an unplanned career Q&A session. But Uncle Vernon wasn't done yet. No, not by a long shot. He stood up, cleared his throat, and raised his voice just enough to sound dadly without sounding desperate. "Well, good for you, Nate," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Still, you should have mentioned it. Family supports family, right? We'd have been proud. Maybe even helped if you needed a little startup cash." I tilted my head slightly, incredulous. "You mean the same family that thought I was wasting my time?" "Come on, don't be like that," he said, trying to chuckle. "We didn't really think that. We just didn't understand what you were doing." I nodded slowly. "Exactly." He faltered for a beat. And then, right on cue, Aunt Marie chimed in with the first real dagger. "Well, if Nate's doing so well now, maybe he could help out with the family fundraiser next month. Your cousin Taylor's going to Europe for her art residency. The travel costs have been steep." My eyes locked on hers. "So this is what it comes to, huh?" The tent got even quieter. And just as I was about to answer her, another figure entered the tent. Another stranger to the rest of the family, but not to me. This time, it was my lawyer. He walked briskly toward me with a manila folder under his arm, nodded at me, and said in his calm, professional tone, "Sorry to interrupt, Nate, but I thought you'd want to sign off on the final offer documents for the old riverfront project. Everything's lined up." Aunt Doreen's eyes nearly popped out of her head. I took the folder, flipped it open, scanned the pages briefly, and scribbled my signature. "Thanks, Mark," I said, handing it back. "Send it over to the Planning Commission." He nodded and left. I looked around the tent again. This time, I didn't need to say anything. The silence spoke for itself. And then, finally, Uncle Vernon said the one thing that made the entire table go stiff. "I didn't realize you had that kind of money." But I didn't respond to him. Not yet. Because just then, my phone buzzed, and the name on the screen was someone who would shift the room even more than the billionaire or the lawyer had. The name on the screen lit up in crisp white letters. C. Thornwell. The reaction from the table wasn't immediate. Most of them didn't know who that was. But a few, including Evan and Maddie, leaned closer. I saw Evan's brow wrinkle like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Maddie's eyes went wide. "Is that?" Evan whispered. I held up a finger as I answered the call. "Hey, Thorn. Yeah, I'm at the reunion. Just wrapping up lunch. What's up?" A brief pause on the other end. I could hear chatter, office noise, keyboards, movement, before a deep, clipped voice responded. "Didn't want to bug you, boss, but the Singapore numbers just landed. They're even better than forecasted. That bump in transit analytics paid off." I nodded, as if we were chatting about grocery lists. "That's good. Send me the full report when you can." "Oh, and CFO says congratulations. Your valuation just crossed the threshold. We'll be sending the media release later today, but you're officially past the billion mark. You did it." My fingers curled tighter around the phone, but my voice stayed level. "Appreciate it, Thorn. Talk soon." I hung up, quietly, casually. The table, on the other hand, was not quiet. 8 billion. Alex repeated, blinking like he was trying to reset his vision. Evan sat down slowly, like gravity had changed. Wait. Are you saying your company, you, are worth $1 billion? I didn't answer directly. Instead, I reached for my drink and took a slow sip of lemonade, letting the silence stretch. "I knew it," Maddie muttered, almost to herself. "You were never just the tech guy. You were building something this whole time." But not everyone was stunned into admiration. Uncle Vernon leaned back in his chair, arms folded tight. His expression had changed, no longer smug or confused, just hard, like someone watching their grip on a rope slowly slip away, knot by knot. "You sure kept this quiet," he said, voice low. "Wasn't hiding anything," I replied. "Just didn't think anyone cared." "We did care," Aunt Doreen cut in. "We're family. You should have told us. We would have supported you." "Really?" I raised an eyebrow. Would that be before or after everyone laughed at me for starting a software company in my garage? A few people shifted in their seats. No one offered a rebuttal. "I worked day and night for years." I continued, my tone still calm but firmer now. "While you all were sending group texts about me being the IT dropout, or asking if I could fix your router at Thanksgiving. I was designing a municipal AI system that now runs in 6 cities. I've pitched to councils, hired teams, lost sleep, lost money, rebuilt it all again. And not once, not one single time, did anyone call and ask, "How's it going?" Not even once. A heavy silence fell. I could see Aunt Marie trying to conjure some response, her lips pursing, eyes darting. But now, I added, gesturing vaguely around the table, now that the word billion is in the air, suddenly everyone's interested. That's not fair. Uncle Vernon snapped, voice rising. Isn't it? I asked, looking him square in the eyes. His jaw clenched. You think just because you've got some money now, you're better than us? No, I said, without hesitation. I think I'm no longer beneath you. And that seems to bother you. That silenced him more than anything else had. I saw him glance toward the other tables, where the rest of the family had now entirely stopped pretending not to watch. A few uncles stared down at their drinks. My Aunt Marie had gone pale. Cousin Taylor looked like she wanted to teleport out of the tent. But the final blow didn't come from me. It came from Maddie. She stood up slowly, looking around at everyone with a quiet kind of disappointment. You all made fun of him for years, she said. And now you're embarrassed because he made it without you. Maddie, Aunt Doreen started. No, Maddie snapped, her voice rising slightly. Let's not pretend. I remember the texts. The jokes. The Christmas where everyone said he should just give up and move home. He built a company that's changing cities, and you're mad because he didn't invite you along for the ride. Her voice cracked a little at the end. She wasn't trying to humiliate them. She was hurt. Genuinely hurt. And for the first time, the guilt in the tent was real. Not the fake, awkward kind that comes when you get caught, but the heavy, cold kind that settles in when you realize you were the villain in someone else's story. That's when Aunt Marie stood up and said, quietly, maybe we should take a short break. But I wasn't done. I stood, brushing off my hands, and looked around the table. I've got no interest in making this a public shaming session, I said. I came here to see family. But let's not rewrite history to make everyone feel better. You didn't believe in me, and I don't hold a grudge for that. I just don't forget it. And then I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a small, folded card. I handed it to Uncle Vernon. He looked down at it, frowning. What's this? The projected valuation report, I said. The one you said I'd never live to see. I had it printed just for you. And with that, I turned and started walking away toward the edge of the lawn, where the gravel path led toward the parked cars. But just as I reached the valet, I heard running footsteps behind me. Nate, wait, Maddie called out. I turned. She caught up to me, a little out of breath. You're leaving? For now, I said. I've got meetings Monday. Singapore expansion. She looked up at me for a long moment. I'm sorry for how they treated you. I shook my head. You don't owe me an apology. You never treated me that way. She hesitated, then asked, will you come back next year? I gave a long pause, then smiled. Depends on who's still sitting at the corner table. But before I could get in the car, I saw someone else approaching. Not Maddie, not Evan, Uncle Vernon. And his face wasn't angry anymore. It was something else entirely. He raised a hand. Wait, before you go? There's something I need to say. He stopped a few feet away from me, awkwardly adjusting his belt like it gave him time to think. Uncle Vernon had always been the loudest in the room. The one with the jokes, the cheap barstool wisdom, the dismissive smirks. But now he stood with his mouth slightly open, staring at me like I was someone he'd never really looked at before. He started, then cleared his throat. I didn't know. I raised an eyebrow. Didn't know what? That you were actually doing something real. That you were successful. I kept my hands in my pockets, watching him carefully. You didn't ask. You assumed. He gave a small, regretful nod. Yeah, I guess I did. I figured you were just messing around with apps or whatever. I didn't think you'd. He let the sentence trail off like it physically hurt to finish. Build something, I offered. He looked away. Yeah. The breeze blew gently through the trees behind us, and I watched him as the weight of years settled onto his shoulders. The swagger was gone. The condescension, too. What remained was just a man who had underestimated someone, and now had to face that in full view of everyone. I know I messed up, he muttered, scratching the back of his neck. I treated you like a joke. Didn't think much of what you were doing. But I guess I was wrong. I let the silence stretch. I didn't want to bail him out of it. He looked back at me, his eyes more honest than I'd seen them in years. So, I just wanted to say I'm sorry. Really. For all the times I made you feel like you weren't worth much. That was wrong of me. It wasn't a dramatic apology. It wasn't filled with poetic regret or begging. But it was sincere. And coming from Vernon, that was monumental. I nodded once. Thank you. He exhaled like he'd been holding that breath all day. I don't expect you to forgive me or anything. I just wanted you to know. I don't hold grudges, Vernon, I said. But I don't forget either. He gave a tight smile. Fair enough. Then, like it was the only thing he could think to say, he added, if your company ever needs trucks or fleet vehicles, well, you know where to find me. And there it was. A flicker of the old Vernon. Not mean this time, not mocking, just trying to offer something in return. It made me chuckle. I extended my hand. I'll keep that in mind. He shook it, then nodded once before walking back toward the tent, slower than usual, like his mind was somewhere else. I got into the car, finally ready to leave. But as I pulled onto the gravel path, I glanced at the rearview mirror. The reunion was still in full swing, but something about the energy had changed. Less laughter, more whispers. Some cousins were looking my way. Others avoided it. It didn't bother me. I wasn't that kid they dismissed anymore. 3 days later, I was back in Seattle, sitting in my office on the 23rd floor of a building I now owned. The city skyline shimmered in the distance. Screens on the wall blinked with live analytics from our different branches: San Diego, Denver, Toronto, soon Singapore. Thornwell entered with a document folder under one arm and a coffee in the other. Press release went live, he said. Bloomberg already picked it up. Urban Neural Systems passes billion-dollar valuation. You want me to approve interview requests? Just pick a couple, preferably ones that don't want a rags-to-riches headline. He gave me a smirk. Can't guarantee that. I shrugged. Still not the headline I want. He hesitated, then handed me another envelope. This also came in. Certified mail. From a Vernon Mitchell. I took the envelope, opening it carefully. Inside was a short, handwritten note on dealership letterhead. Nate, I meant what I said. And if this note feels out of place, it's because I've never written one before. But I'm proud of you. You earned everything you've got. If you ever want to stop by the old place, lunch is on me. Vernon. I stared at it for a moment, then slid it into the bottom drawer of my desk. I didn't need to frame it or read it again. It was enough that it existed. Weeks passed. The company kept growing. I traveled more, held meetings with mayors and boards and planners, helped cities run smarter and smoother. But the reunion didn't fade from memory like others had. This one stuck. Then, one day in late fall, Maddie emailed me. It was short. Hey, I applied for a data science internship. Hope you don't mind. I used you as a reference. P.S. If your team's hiring next summer, let me know. M. I smiled at the screen. She had always been sharp, just buried under the weight of that family's noise. I replied, I don't mind. In fact, I already told HR to watch for your name. You've got potential, Mads. The real kind. N. Months later, I returned to the same estate for another family gathering. This time a birthday party for one of the younger cousins. I wasn't planning to attend, but Maddie had texted me directly. This time, I saved you a seat at the front table. When I arrived, things felt different. Warmer. More measured. People didn't trip over themselves trying to impress me. But they didn't dismiss me either. Aunt Doreen gave a tight hug and actually asked questions about the business. Evan showed me a new app he was building. Even Alex admitted, you proved us wrong, man. Big time. But the best part? When I sat down at the table, Maddie passed me a plate and said with a grin, no corner table this time. I looked around the room, then back at her. Nope, I said. Not anymore. And for the first time in a very long time, being with family didn't feel like a chore. It felt like closure. Maybe even the beginning of something better. Because sometimes, the best revenge is living well enough that they finally see you. Not the version they mocked, doubted, or underestimated, but the real you. The one who never stopped building, even when nobody else was watching.